There are abandoned buildings that, even now, seem to have life still hidden inside. Rusty beds, damp hallways, broken windows, and rooms where for decades footsteps have been heard.
The breathing and voices of patients who never made it out.
In this video, we will visit 10 abandoned hospitals that seem to have been left behind in a dark era.
Some of these started as sanatoriums for patients with tuberculosis. Others are psychiatric institutions that were deliberately isolated from the world. And others still bear traces of war, epidemics, local legends, and stories that to this day are hard to separate what is truth and what is myth. From forbidden islands to sprawling medical complexes that are off limits, hidden deep within the forest.
These places reveal the quieter, yet more unsettling side of abandonment.
This is the story of buildings that were built to heal, but over time became places of fear, decay, and memories.
But before we begin, if you're new to our channel, please click the subscribe button and also hit the notification bell so you'll always be updated with our latest videos. Brestovac Sanatorium, Croatia. On the slopes of Mount Medvednica, just outside Zagreb, stands the Brestovac Sanatorium, which was built in 1909 because of love. It was championed by the doctor and writer Millie Deshman,
who tried to save Jerka Schramm, an actress loved by the whole city and his great love since their youth. He convinced the wealthy people of Zagreb to fund the construction of the sanatorium and dedicated the rest of his life to it. Of his life to fighting tuberculosis, which was slowly destroying her health. But it was not enough. In 1913, Deshman found Jerka covered in blood after suffering a lung injury. Not long after, she died in his arms. Since then, some locals say that a blood-soaked figure roams the area.
It is said to be seen in the hallways and in the nearby forest, as well as in the underground tunnels where patients in more serious condition are taken and buried.
The sanatorium grew and became a small, almost self-sufficient community with its own bakery, cinema, and radio station.
But everything changed when it was turned into a military hospital during the Second World War. When Zagreb was liberated, the Yugoslav partisans killed the wounded soldiers they found lying in their beds, while only saving the medical personnel.
The hospital closed in 1968.
Today, its ruins, slowly being swallowed by the forest, continue to strengthen the same legend that Jerka's shadow never left that place.
Denbigh Asylum, Wales.
In the county of Denbighshire, in North Wales, you can find the old Denbigh Asylum, which was built in 1848 to address a particular problem. Welsh patients ended up in hospitals in England where no one spoke their language, so they became even more isolated while going through a crisis. It was designed for 200 people, but eventually, it housed up to 1,000 patients, with beds crammed into the hallways. So some of the patients had to get into their beds feet first. It closed in 1995, and now it's one of the most investigated places by ghost hunters in the United Kingdom. Several groups have recorded electronic voices repeatedly saying, "Help me" or "Get out," especially in the isolation cells. In 2008, a television program recorded several episodes there. The presenters wore straitjackets while searching for spirits, and even live on air, they said that the town of Denbigh was cursed by witches.
This caused intense outrage, so a mental health association filed a formal complaint because of the mockery of the real struggles of people who once lived and were treated there. Sanatorium Dr. C.A. Caramulo, Portugal.
In the mountains of Caramulo, at an altitude of 800 meters in central Portugal, stood the largest sanatorium resort in the entire Iberian Peninsula.
It was made up to 19 buildings and could treat more than 2,500 tuberculosis patients at the same time. It all started in 1922 when Dr. Geronimo de la Cerda opened a hotel for recovering patients.
After just 6 years, it became a large sanatorium, and an entire village formed around it.
The first method of treatment was based on rest, complete silence for many hours, and eating a lot so that the patients would gain weight. But when that was not enough, they used more extreme surgical methods.
One of these was the removal of ribs to collapse and shrink the affected lung. A French surgeon traveled there specifically to introduce this technique to Caramulo, but he passed away while on his way there. Because of this, the local doctors had to learn the operation through trial and error. At that time, almost all the patients who underwent surgery died on the operating table. When tuberculosis was finally controlled in 1970, people almost suddenly disappeared from the village. Today, only 6 sanatoriums remain completely abandoned, including the surgery pavilion. There, you can still see a rusty stretcher in front of the room where operations used to be performed. Island Center, Australia. On a small island in the Hawkesbury River, less than an hour from Sydney, a psychiatric hospital operated from 1911 to 2010. The most feared part of it was what they called Ward 4, which a doctor who worked there described as a real prison inside the hospital itself. According to records, at least 300 people died and were buried in unmarked graves. In 1940, an 8-year-old boy was found drowned after being locked in a cage as punishment. 10 years later, another child died from suffocation inside a metal laundry container. The staff said it happened while he was supposedly playing hide-and-seek.
In 1981, a teenager was picked up by his parents and siblings. A journalist called this place the Hospital of Forgotten Children.
Since 2010, it has been completely empty.
Medea Sanatorium, Georgia. In the Georgian town of Tiscaltubo, which was once a famous thermal spa destination of the Soviet Union, you can find the Medea Sanatorium.
It was named after the sorceress from Greek mythology, Medea, who was said to have ruled over the healing waters of the same region, the ancient land of Colchis. It was built in 1950 with large colonnades and halls made of marble. Even Stalin personally came here to treat his arthritis using the radon-rich waters. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the patients in the sanatoriums suddenly disappeared. But just a year later, the war in Abkhazia displaced more than 200,000 Georgians, and thousands of refugees found shelter in the vacant buildings of Tiscaltubo. What was supposed to be temporary housing became the permanent home of entire families. Here they were born, grew up, and grew old inside the former Soviet treatment rooms because the government never fulfilled its promise of permanent housing for them. Today, most of them have been relocated elsewhere, but there are still some families living among the faded frescoes and cracked marble staircases of the Medea Sanatorium.
This is not a haunted building in the usual sense. It's a place that never truly lost its people. A place that, for 3 decades, has been home to people who fled a war they still haven't fully forgotten. Sanatorium du Basile, Belgium, in the middle of the Belgian Ardennes forest. On a hill 420 meters high near the village of Bourgamont stands the Basile Sanatorium.
It was built in 1900 by the director of a bacteriological laboratory. The curved southern-facing facade of the building was designed to get the most sunlight, which at that time was considered essential in the treatment of tuberculosis. When the disease was no longer considered a death sentence, the building did not disappear completely. Instead, its use simply changed. In 1978, it was turned into a psychiatric center, and from 2010 to 2013, it served as a residence for asylum seekers fleeing unrest and war in other countries.
For more than a century, The same building became home to people with severe infectious diseases, then to patients with mental health problems, and finally to people fleeing from violence. Despite its eventual abandonment,
The power remained on in some parts of the building for many years. Because of this, some neighbors heard stories about presences wandering the empty hallways at night.
Jansky Kopole, Czech Republic,
Hidden in a clearing in the middle of the forest near Opava, Czech Republic, you can find Jansky Kopele, a spa town founded in 1810 around 3 springs with mineral water. For more than a century, it served as a water spa with hotels and a bathhouse that attracted people from all over the region. After the Second World War, the government of Czechoslovakia took over the entire complex and turned it into a sanatorium for children. Its goal was to treat and help children recover from various illnesses. This was under the healthcare system of the communist regime. There were also plans to expand it using funds from the Marshall Plan. But when the communist coup happened in February 1948, the project, which was only half finished, was cancelled. The sanatorium continued its operations until it finally closed in 1994. Since then, no one has lived here again. The buildings remain intact, but they are slowly being consumed by time and the forest. It's as if an entire village was suddenly abandoned without anyone being able to say what happened. Harastollen Sanatorium, Norway. 500 meters above the Sognefjord in western Norway stands Harastollen, the former Lister Sanatorium. It was built in 1912 specifically to be a secluded facility. In the past, the only way to get here was by cable car, because patients with tuberculosis needed to be completely isolated from the rest of the population. At its peak, the facility became the largest sanatorium in Norway, with a capacity of 150 patients. In 1958, it was converted into a psychiatric hospital. In the early 1990s, it changed its purpose once again. For a short period, it served as a shelter for refugees from the Balkan War, before it finally closed in 1944. Since then, it could only be reached by a road with 13 sharp curves. Because of its remote location, it became a regular destination for Norwegians seeking what they believed to be ghosts. One of the most famous stories is about the woman they call the Linen Warehouse Girl, a presence said to be felt inside the building. In 2015, the place was also used as the setting for the horror film Villmark 2 Kings Park Psychiatric Center, United States. On Long Island, New York, lies Kings Park Psychiatric Center, a massive complex made up of more than 150 buildings. In 1954, it had more than 9,300 patients, making it one of the largest psychiatric hospitals in the entire country. When lobotomy and electroshock therapy became common methods of treatment,
the institution that was originally built to provide care and rest became a place feared by the very people it was supposed to help.
It was permanently closed in 1996. Since then, one of its most well-known buildings, Building 93, has become one of the places on Long Island believed to be haunted. There are neighbors and visitors who say they hear screams in the early morning.
The sound of chains being dragged through empty hallways, and a female figure that suddenly appears and disappears in a bar near the former facility.
According to some employees and customers, they said they saw the woman standing near the bar.
Poveglia Island, Italy. If you've been following this channel for a long time, you might already be familiar with the silhouette of this place.
Poveglia Island has appeared several times in previous videos, and there's a very simple reason why we're revisiting it again. There's no other place in the world that holds so many true horror stories in such a small area.
It's only about 345 meters long and 335 meters wide, right in the middle of the Venice Lagoon.
It all started in the 14th century when the city was severely hit by the Black Death. Anyone who showed even the slightest symptoms was immediately sent to the island, even if it wasn't certain that they were really sick. For many centuries, Poveglia served as a lazaretto, or a place where people with contagious diseases were kept and isolated. It is estimated that between 100,000 and 160,000 people died there during successive outbreaks of the plague. Many of them were burned in large bonfires when there was no longer enough space for their burial. According to local legend, a large part of the land on the island is said to be made up of the ashes of those who perished. In 1922, the Italian government built a psychiatric hospital on top of the old ruins. There are stories that a doctor there performed experiments and lobotomies on patients without anesthesia. According to legend, the doctor eventually lost his mind because of the voices of his patients. In the end, he reportedly jumped from the top of the bell tower. The bell was removed decades ago, but some visitors still claim they hear it ringing every night. In 2014, a businessman won a public auction to lease the island for 99 years. He planned to build a luxury resort there, but the project never materialized. Today, Poveglia remains almost empty, and it is one of the places in Europe with strict prohibitions on permanent residence.
10 hospitals, 10 different stories, but only one thing they all fear.
The fear of places that were once built to heal people, but in many cases the opposite happened. From the love that led to the construction of Brestovac to the bureaucracy that forced thousands of refugees to live inside a former Soviet sanatorium, to the operating rooms where surgeries caused more deaths than the diseases themselves. What all these places have in common is not just being abandoned, but the fact that at one point in their history, people entered these places. It is expected that the people who enter these buildings would come out in better condition than when they went in. But that didn't always happen. And that's the feeling that still seems to linger in the air. Sometimes, their empty hallways are even scarier than anything that could be inside.
Of all these abandoned hospitals, which one do you find the most disturbing? Let me know in the comments.
And if you want to explore more strange and mysterious places in our world, subscribe to Noel Polo Television. We will keep looking for places like these here.